Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Diversified Semantic Layer podcast. This is Eric Vallow, joined by my ever cohort in crime, Jamie Oswald, right there. We're joined by two new friends, Alda and Mizaku. Alda, you want to say hey?
Hi. So I can do a quick introduction. My name's Alda, and I'm currently in analytics program management in healthcare. Prior to that, I worked in high throughput genotyping, and then before that, it was computer aided diagnostics. So lots of data, geeky things. Love to talk more with you guys.
Well, that's pretty awesome. And then we have Hudson Harris.
Do I really have to follow that? Like I could have gone first, and then we could have peaked after me.
Yeah, I feel like I could just hit the mute button here now. We'll just.
I work for a clinical and technology services companies for behavioral health. So we do big data work across the spectrum. If it involves mental health, behavioral health, substance abuse, emergency departments, jails, crisis, suicide, that is where we are.
And so, oh my gosh, I'm rusty enough at this that I guess maybe a little primer on what we're talking about tonight, and that's healthcare analytics and what works and what doesn't, and what's good and what's bad. Thus, maybe, Jamie, our first industry-specific podcast ever that I can think of.
It's certainly the first one we've ever aired. Yeah.
Right, that we could. Yeah. So that being said, we have representation from all over the healthcare industry and a lot of nerdy brain power with a whole lot of tool background at the same time, I would say. So welcome to the show, friends. Glad you could join us and hope you're enjoying your beverage of choice tonight. So let's get started. So maybe we'll kick it off with just a little bit of open dialogue, right? I think if you look at any modern industry research, business intelligence, data analytics remains at the top of IT spend as a whole, and we've all been in healthcare long enough to know that what healthcare organization isn't run on big data today. So what about a general vibe from the panel here? Is your use of data and analytics in your enterprise having a positive, just okay, mediocre impact on how you run your business and how you help people? Alda.
All right. Well, I mean, being in data engineering and analytics, I think I'm a little bit biased. I have to say yes. Of course we have a positive impact. We enable our organization to make data-driven decisions. But I mean, in all reality, it's a really interesting question because it really depends on how analytics is perceived from the industry. And I think, being in an organization that delivers data, I think we have a different perspective than those that are really receiving it. We ended up doing kind of a survey recently, and the results that came out from that were a little bit mixed. How the analytics is being perceived in the business, and I think that there's an appreciation for it, and there's a demand for it, but maybe there needs to be more kind of an understanding of what generally is being kind of asked for, what it really means to do the type of analytics that are kind of requested. The majority of the time, things that we'll get are very broad ideas, maybe without that understanding of what it really takes in a lot of issues. So I think that the demand is there, but maybe some more work on really how to realize the value and the potential that it can have in the healthcare field.
Yeah, I would, if I could add on, Alda, if you don't mind. I think that a lot of that has to do with just classic analytics maturity model stuff, right? So in healthcare, what you'll find is it's a very segmented industry, right? So consolidation has been the rule for the last 10 or 15 years, and there are still just a million different players out there in the provider market, right? So You've got big systems, you've got small systems, you've got rural systems, you've got religious systems. You've just got so much differentiation out there. It's impossible to find two groups that are exactly the same. The other thing is that within all of those organizations, they're different kinds of at different levels of maturity, right? So while, if you think about the classic analytics maturity model, you go from descriptive, just being able to provide accurate historical data, to predictive, to guess what's coming next, to prescriptive, where you're saying, here's the action you should take based on this data. We're just all over the place on that still, right? So we've got some places they can't accurately report what they're doing because their EHR isn't capturing data appropriately, or because they've got, things in their cost data is at one level of granularity in their GL, and their operations data is a different level of granularity in some other system, to really robust, accurate data sets, and just trying to map what analytics means to different people across that spectrum is impossible.
So if you don't mind, I think I'd like to break that into two bits. And if you could have the brothel turn the lights up a little bit. We're having trouble seeing you in any way.
So
there are a lot
go back to the Blair Witch. I like the Blair Witch.
There are a lot of different ways to take care of your own personal health.
So, in your experiences in your organizations, there's two levels of maturity, though, right? The pace in which you can accumulate data off of your source systems, whether it's procurement or your EMR EHRs to your legal systems. Like, how mature do you find that you've been able to get to be able to keep up with the needs of the business and their appetite for that data?
I mean, for us, it's been the biggest challenge has been really getting like the legal and permissions to get access to that data. But once all of that is lined up, then the mechanics of bringing the data into a warehouse has not been extremely challenging. It does take a little bit of time, but I think the tools and the best practices are in place for us to be able to bring in new data sources. And I feel like we've got quite a bit integrated already. But anytime that there is kind of a new system where data resides, being able to work through the logistics of getting access to that is definitely a challenge. And then the other thing is, even when you do get access and bring that data in, there's an assumption made that that data is being populated in a consistent manner, that the workflow is followed consistently amongst all the different entities that input data into it. And that we have seen to not be the case. So whenever we try to drive analytics from it, it makes it extremely challenging because the data really doesn't show what people expect it to. And the first thing that comes to people's mind is, oh, there's something wrong with the analytics, but it's really in the workflow of how that data is being inputted, that or how it's being entered, that really causes a lot of issues that come out when you do try to do the analytics. I mean, that's just been my experience, but Jamie, Hudson, what have you guys seen in your areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've reached a point as an industry where the technology is not the limiting step for getting the data to do stuff. It's really data governance, data hygiene, and knowledge about what it actually does. I think there's a lot of people who are convinced that big data and predictive analytics are going to revolutionize their business. They just have no clue as to how that's going to happen. And that results in poor data hygiene, poor data governance, and a lack of an overall data strategy to get the value and insights that you should be able to get.
Sorry, my dog is snoring like really loud. It was really distracting. Could you back up to hygiene? Sorry. So then on the other side of that, then if tools aren't the limiting factor and your ability to acquire data, going back to Jamie, your reference to the maturity model for analytics, are business users today able to keep up with their own needs? Is that myth of self-service? That was a terrible setup. Not the myth, is the idea of self-service within reach for your business users, or is it still primarily an IT-driven program?
What do you mean by self-service?
Well, the idea that every user should be able to crank open a query and go create their own analytics and derive business decisions.
See, if I had 10 users, I don't think more than 2 of them would say that is their definition of self-service, right? So I always go back to self-service for some people is I want to log into a system and refresh a crystal report and get to choose my own parameters for what date range I want, and that is my self-service. Some people want to hack away right at the EDW. Some people want to write Python. Some people, want to use like a more webby type interface where they get to select, business objects and generate a query and then format the output. I think one big thing that's still handling and haranguing and holding us up is just that we can't agree on what self-service is. Now, I don't think we will ever get to agree on what self-service is, right? I think we're always going to have disparate needs, but I think when we have those conversations, especially within our organizations with our users, do I just need, when I say self-service, do I just need to give them a way to get down to the lowest level of granularity and deal with it there? For some people, yes. For some people, no. But I think thinking about that as you're building out your artifacts is super important, right? So even if you can't give them, what I would argue is true self-service, where they're hitting the database on their own and writing their own select star from type statements, giving them access to the data and planning on giving them access to that data is really important. And here I'm just going to plug SAP Business Objects Explorer one last time.
I will say, like the self-service stuff, we did some predictive stuff with you, Eric, that was it felt self-service. It felt like, here's the data, here's the elements, and then what are the natural things you can tell me about my data? That was really cool. I don't know how far that can go to provide really in-depth business insights, but it was definitely like the closest I've ever felt to self-service to be able to say, here's this massive data, what can you tell me about it?
I feel like there's still a gap between what a traditional BI vendor calls self-service and the reality that enterprises, whether you're healthcare or not, face in terms of who should be creating content and authoring it and who should be consuming it. And I think it's even more important, Hudson, to your point, today to define the personas of BI users that should be using tools. Like, it's interesting to talk to customers today that have an analyst, and the definition of an analyst is so broad that it will span from somebody that knows how to create a Tableau visualization that blows your mind to the guy that's right out of college and is a Python R ninja and just wants to write scripts against Hadoop all day. But they're in the same group and they have the same job title and drastically different skill sets. I'm curious, is that similar to your experiences, or at least how do you cater to, the number of users in the organization coming from just a different place altogether and how they want to consume analytics?
Well, I want to go back for just a second because I think what you said, Eric, is a really important comment on the expectation from the business on who should be providing analytics and who should be consuming it in this concept of self-service. We have tools that, can be considered self-service, but when we went in to talk about it with the business and say, okay, this is going to be available to you, or this is available to you, these are all the things that you can do. The part that was surprising is that it was, so from analytics, for this particular group, they expected that to come from IT. So when we did provide self-service capabilities, it was perceived as, oh, so you don't have enough people to do what we need, so you're making a system or providing a system for us to do it, which was, really not the intent, or unlike kind of what we're trying to do with that. So, there's something to be said about the expectation of the group that will be using self-service to provide with their organization, answers to questions that they're trying to reach. But, to go back to your second question of, is there kind of diversity in skill sets, be it both within analytics or people that are asking analytics? I think that's definitely true for us. You've got people with the same title that do completely different things, or people with different titles that do the same thing. And that is very challenging to work through as well.
And the higher the title, the less they do. Right? I mean, that's just universal.
What's your title, James?
It's high enough. It's high enough.
I can't even spell Webby anymore.
Is that assistant to the regional branch manager?
Oh my gosh.
No. I'm not his assistant.
No spoilers. We're on the last 2 episodes of The Office ever right now, and it's a very tense time in our house. We didn't watch it when it was on live. We're watching it now.
Better late than never.
Right?
No, I'd much rather have another reason to rag on you.
Yeah. We'll find more, I'm sure. So, Alda, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Can I chime in real fast before you move us on? I think that the other thing that we're starting to see is that even within the same organizations, you'll have a data scientist with a comp sci background and 20 years experience with all the words that Eric said about data analytics things, R, Hadoop, etc. And then you'll have somebody who has no experience with that, but has 20 years experience doing data modeling through traditional academic methods, or they're a statistical nerd, or bioinformatics and all these other degrees that are being created around data modeling. That, I don't know, it's the strata and the differences between people. It's really almost a choose your own adventure. Like, you want somebody that does this with this kind of background and this kind of experience that can do academic level data models, or do you want somebody that can get it done quick and dirty and get you what you want as quick as possible, but you're never going to publish it?
Quick and dirty every time.
I know, that is your middle name.
Yeah. No, I think that brings up a great point, right? Because right now I'm working to fill several positions, and I can't find anybody. If there are 4 hallmarks of this position that I'm looking for, I can't find anybody who fills all 4, right? So which 3 do I really think are important? Unless I find somebody who's great at 2 of them, and I have to somehow supplant the other 2. So I think that's a great point, that there's not really one person who fills that data role for you. And, I think you overshot a little bit too, because I think a lot of times the most valuable people you can have no idea how to write SQL. They have no idea of advanced statistical methods, but they can look at any spreadsheet you give them and spot the problem within 2 seconds, right? Like those folks that, you blindly CC on an email thinking that they'll never even open it. And 2 seconds later, you get back with, that seems really high. These 2 numbers don't match. I looked at another dashboard 3 weeks ago that had a different number. I don't know why they're different. And I think that the important thing is meeting all of those needs and getting all of those people together to come up with the right solution.
Yeah. I mean, the most important thing with analytics is the team concept, is that you've got a team that delivers. And ultimately, that's really the goal at the end, is that you've got a product that meets a specific need. And it may not be as important how it got there. Was it the developer that wrote the code? Was it the BA? Was it the tester? I don't know. Does it matter?
A lot of the coaching that we've been giving, you're right, that there's a skills gap is maybe the wrong word, but having overly broad job recs to find a person to check boxes A, B, and C is difficult. But it becomes ever important that in our technology teams, we have those strong skill sets in data ingestion, beautiful visualization that tell the right story, that are predictive and prescriptive in nature. But the thing that I always have to remind my customers is your business user isn't the enemy just because they bitch, moan, and groan. We have to partner with them because they're the experts of their domains of data. Like, we have to extract from them like they're a part of our team, because if they hate our guts, then we lose. We've already lost.
Well, it's not even just that we need to pick their brains up front, but at the end of the day, whatever we come up with, they have to implement. Right? So I can come up with fantastic insights all day, every day. And if nobody goes and changes the process or takes advantage of those opportunities, we're nothing but an expense, right?
Well said. If there's nothing else on that, that's actually a really good segue to something else that was on my mind. You're all innovation award winners. I've been cyber stalking from afar. So when you think about your roles in healthcare, whether it's through IT innovation or through game-changing business ideas to increase revenues or decrease costs, like, what do you guys think the next evolution for healthcare is going to be? Does AI and machine learning live up to the hype? Is it something else? Is blockchain ever going to take hold?
Honestly, for me, I think it's super boring. I think it's just being able to scale adequately.
Dude, I'm out. Hang up.
What do you mean scale?
If you're
That's not good for marketing, Jamie.
If you're leaving here because I'm boring, you've stuck around for like 6 or 7 years too long.
It's been 10. I don't know if you noticed. We just had 10 years on this podcast, bro.
So when I say scale, I don't necessarily mean technology. I don't necessarily mean numbers. I mean more insights, right? To where I can say, okay, it's great. I have paired the right analyst with the right business owner, with the right developer, and I have created a fantastic solution for our, lab or pharmacy or behavioral health unit or whatever in this one location way over here. I think our next challenge is to say, okay, great. We've solved this problem in this unit. Show me all of the other units that are like this, that are having this problem, and show me how to solve their problem at scale to those other places. And once I've solved it for my organization, why aren't I figuring out how to help other organizations solve that same thing? I think there's so much manual stuff and there is so many silos. I mean, a lot of that are for very good reasons, right? Not every organization captures all the right data they need. Not every organization has processes in place that they can even, change and adjust. But I think, to me, that's the big problem. I mean, we constantly talk about low-hanging fruit, and the real secret is like, we have easily 50 years of low-hanging fruit in healthcare to go through before we need to solve any big problems.
You don't want to buy
they're just not sexy.
No. Well, just kidding. So
sorry, that was my answer with scale.
No, I got a follow-on question if you don't mind, though.
You're wearing me out, bud.
Sassy.
Mic drop right there. You walked out.
I'll re-energize.
No, I'm done.
Now, come on, at me.
It's about to be a super boring podcast. I actually forgot what I was going to say. Alda, Hudson, what do you guys think? Is he smoking crack?
I want to
not mutually exclusive.
That is correct. I had to walk my brain back through that, but yes, they are not mutually exclusive. Jamie, you're correct.
Focus.
I think the biggest hurdle that's coming up, and what people really have to figure out, is that sense of immediacy, that ability to get that just-in-time. What are they calling it? The FDA just did a whole thing on CDSS, Clinical Decision Support Systems. And I think that's what you're going to start to see. I think it'll start in clinical because it's easiest. Not necessarily AI, but intelligently filtered client data. The ability to get data insights right as you need them, I think, is what's really going to drive it to the next level. Because I think the business intelligence stuff is really cool and it really drives value. And like, I've had a lot of value out of it in demonstrating that we did a thing and we could prove we did a thing. But I think that where you start to go over the edge, the tipping point, is when you can have a everyday user be like, my Spidey sense says this, is this person at risk for this? Or the system is intuiting, there was a big data pilot in Texas where they figured out that the leading indicator of heart attacks in men over 40 was a housing change in the past 48 hours. And like, it was a humongous correlation. And so now they know to always ask those questions. I think when you get to a point where you start to drill in on actually improving the qualities of the clinical life or the user life or the line user's life as they interact with customers, clients, patients, et cetera, I think you're going to start to see a big turnover with more people buying in than they are now. Because now I think it's still somewhat ephemeral in some places.
So if I could just clarify, in Texas, it's technically bigger data. Just for whatever that's worth.
Bigger data.
Yes.
Thanks, Jamie.
So, it's sort of hard for me to not put myself in the situation of the systems I'm sort of familiar with that you use. But let's take the big box EMR, for example, that by its very nature has a data latency built into getting the data out of it. Like, what's it going to take? Is it going to be a change from that big box EMR EHR to facilitate real-time data so you can provide that real-time clinician decision support?
That's a thing of the past, Eric. Solved problem.
What was that?
Oh, I was just saying, like that's a solved problem. Real-time data. No, I mean it's a big thing with EHRs, especially with Epic, to have that data be.
I didn't say Epic.
No. With that data just being refreshed overnight, so you're always a day behind. But there are successes that teams have had into pulling that data in real time. So we've got right now four live dashboards with a couple more coming up here in the next couple months that are real time data. I mean, they refresh every minute. So I think that definitely used to be a challenge in the past. It may not be kind of as big of an issue right now. There's ways to get to it, and there's even ways to integrate that with data that comes in from other systems, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Alda. I think what we don't have is where we can just say, yes, snap your fingers, everything is real time all the time, right? But I don't think that I've seen a use case where somebody said, here's the business reason why I need this data every minute when it updates, and somebody can't handle that. And that goes back to Hudson's point too, right? It's not necessarily a technology problem. And then it comes back to mine where it's all about scale. No, I'm just kidding. I think that if you have the right use case, I think that most of those barriers can get knocked out. Now, the problem you will run into is when you have inter-organizational demands, which I think is really the next big step, right? So when I'm a primary care facility in Dallas and I want to know that all of the EDs around me are experiencing increased volume for a particular thing, like trying to get all of them to communicate with me with ADT messages and things like that, that's still really hard to figure out, because that's it doesn't have to be a manual effort to deal with those messages, but it has to be a manual effort to set them up. But in terms of if I'm within my organization, if that data is somewhere in real time, I can usually add my analytics to it anymore, is my perception.
Mm-hmm.
Next. So, okay. So, so with no shortage of need in solving problems in healthcare and difficulty in acquiring people and technology not necessarily being the gap, both in terms of getting data and getting data to where it belongs. I guess maybe that brings me back sort of first full circle to the original question, where I'm trying to figure out, are we finding that the landscape that's in front of us, we're able to be successful in implementing these sorts of solutions, or we're still struggling? Are users satisfied with what we're putting in front of them? And I'm still trying to connect the dots. Like, why are we falling down?
So I think two things. I think one, we're not falling down as much as we have a reputation for. I think some of it is, people want 120% of what they ask for, and we can't always deliver on that, right? But I think if you talk about what they need, I think most healthcare companies have figured out how to deliver a goodly portion of that, at least to keep your business moving forward. I think that our big gaps are mostly at this point legal and organizational, right? Where, yes, we could come up with a fantastic algorithm for predicting sepsis and the 4 treatments that you should have based on who you are and things like that. I think what we're not comfortable with, again, legally or organizationally, is saying, okay, go ahead and act on those steps, right? We still need a doctor to sign every order, or some other authorized person to sign every order. And if something goes wrong, we still have to have someone that we can blame. So I think before we can really get to sort of AI and machine learning and those sorts of nirvanas, we've either got to overcome those steps or figure out how to manage them in a broader sense. I know it's really easy to come up with fantastic ideas for a predictive or prescriptive model in healthcare that will really improve outcomes, right? It's really hard to find a physician or a leader who will say, "Yep, nope, let the computers run with it," right? I mean, that's my perspective. Alda, Hudson, what have you seen?
True AI is we're just not there for that to be accepted in healthcare. The trust in the automation is just not there. And if we're talking about true AI, I would agree with you, completely. But I think we have an even bigger problem on just the ask for analytics. My experience has been that most of the time, there's a requests come in, by the hundreds, but they're what the person is thinking at that time. And it's, the request is coming in as, I want this data, I want this analysis, I want this value, I want this to be delivered or to be given to me. And they're not asking what the problem that they're trying to solve is. So the issue that we're constantly running into is that you can fulfill an ask and say, okay, you asked for this, here it is, there you go, we're done. But they come back because that data leads to more questions, which leads to more analysis. And you go through the cycle where you're trying to guess, what is it that they're trying to do with this? Because if I'd known that from the start, I would have never given them, a particular result. I would have suggested or recommended that they look at this. And we can cut through a lot of those cycles if the request was coming in of, this is what I'm trying to do. Let's work together on what I need for me to get this answer. So, I think the challenges shift. So the challenges that we were having, a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago are different than the ones that we're having right now. But some things that are very fundamental are things that are kind of built into the culture that are really even tougher to change, and things that technology may not even be able to help with.
I super love what you just said, and maybe if I could say it in a different way and tell me if I'm catching you or not. Like, we as IT folk are programmed to be sort of robotic at times, to take in requirements as inputs and give an output, because we have a budget and it's finite and we're supposed to work within a box. But I'm not the first person to say that there's art in analytics, right? Where we need to be creative types to help draw the business to all the right potential conclusions and outcomes, whether we tackle it now or in some kind of a backlog. So don't be a robot, be creative and help the business shape what they want around what they really need.
And I mean, that's a very good summarization. And just to add on top of that, the irony of it is that we're the systems that we build and we put in place to capture the requests that are coming in, we do so in a way that enable us to be more robotic and less creative and artistic in our thinking.
So it's almost a feedback loop that we create the tools to make us more robotic, to make our jobs easier, but then it disconnects us from the clients and what we're actually trying to do.
And it causes more work for us.
Right.
If we were to build that system to say, what problem are you trying to solve? Then it'll help us in the long run. But it's just a mentality shift that we just don't have kind of a good grasp with right now.
Yeah, I think we're setting ourselves up for another really good show to talk about concepts in, agile and human-centered design and how to apply what user experience people have known forever to our world. But we'll save that for another show.
Can I make a suggestion for that show?
I'll decide whether to edit it later. Go ahead.
That Jamie shows up on time?
I feel like I brought more just showing up late. I feel like
it's probably because he was in the middle of a liquor store run to get some more box wine.
Yeah, I'm gonna go out to my UPS app and recall that package, Hudson. So yeah, that's how that works.
Oh,
we just need to have a live one.
Yeah.
Well,
because I won't ever be late.
If he hadn't moved away, we could have.
Oh.
So focus. I'm curious, in the technology front, I meet customers all the time in different places with their belief that the cloud is safe or not safe for healthcare related data. And at the risk of sort of, leading the question, I often see the customer that has really run into what is a real big data problem. So volume of data and compute and where they can go with that to really, really crunch hard numbers, creating this willingness to open themselves up to their data being in the cloud. Like, where are you all with data analytics applications as it pertains to your fields in any cloud? Hudson? I just picked on him because he went dark.
Yeah, sorry. It's uphill. I see a lot of different people, but I think some of the people have no concept of data governance and they're just willing to do whatever they can, and they go with the ask for forgiveness model. I think others are thinking about it probably a little too hard. I worked with a potential client that while I understand we're among friends and at times I am prone to hyperbole, I am not giving hyperbole with what I'm about to say. They had 9 years of a data governance committee before they decided to use the data. And I think that that's like the other end of the spectrum.
Better safe than sorry, Hudson. That's what I would say.
I'll withhold comment, Sir Jamie, until next time. But yes, it is better safe than sorry. But there's also paralysis by analysis. And I think that there's a middle ground. And I think some of the de-identification tools are going to help a lot. But I think that you have to be thoughtful about what you're doing. Not too thoughtful is probably the wrong way to say it. But like, be willing to dare inside of safe spaces. I mean, get legal counsel that's willing to help you achieve, not impede, and then figure out a way to make the magic happen. Because when you start to connect the disparate data sets, holy cows, can some amazing stuff start to happen. That's all I have to say about that.
Anybody else?
I mean, in terms of the question of is cloud safe for healthcare data, I know that was, a year ago or 2 years ago, my thought process would have been a little bit different, but I think today, I don't think that's a question anymore. I think if you pick, one of the kind of the top cloud companies, I think the security is already in there. And it's probably going to be the safest place, for some of that data to live. But, with that in mind, I think, you should have the process the process should be in place to certify whether, and it's not really like where the data is stored, but when you move it. Like the area that we run into risk is when we work with another company. You have to vet their system or where they're storing it. So although it could be safer where it's stored initially, when it's being sent off to different companies or when you're collaborating with different groups, is that where it lands safe? And that really kind of requires a lot of work to determine.
But isn't that the kind of thing that you expect your legal department and a BAA to cover off on? Hudson, you're a
Well,
lawyer.
it's not just about coverage, though, right? It's like, well, it's great that somebody else is legally liable, but I still have to. If I trust Hudson with my data, which I'm not committing to, but if I did and he lost it, I still have to take out full page ads in the areas where I work, whether I pay for them or Hudson pays for them. I still have to take those out that says, hey, by the way, Jamie lost your data. So if you have come to see Jamie at any point in the last 3 years, guess what? Just know it's out there. And if you want, to complain, you can call Jamie or Hudson or whoever you want. So that is still a real thing. It's not just about liability, or it's not just about legal fiduciary liability, right? There's a lot in terms of goodwill that you are losing. Now, I will also say it's 2018, right? Like if you can't find a cloud vendor that is more secure than your 4-person, 8-person, 25-person security team, I would be really surprised. The last thing I would say is that don't think that just saying, yeah, my stuff is slow at month end, I'm going to throw it to the cloud, fixes everything, right? Because you still have to worry about getting data up there, getting data back in a meaningful way. Like there are other things that you have to consider. But I think that just saying, yeah, we're not doing cloud it's a bit immature, right? I mean, that's just not.
It's impossible. Let's be honest.
Dismissing it out of hand is irresponsible at best.
It's impossible.
I mean, they
what
have
is the
Microsoft.
cloud? Your shit on someone else's computer. Who here owns the computers that all of their shit is on? Everybody's hand should go down.
Hey, this is a PG podcast, man. Don't have a.
I know, but
don't explicit tag.
Like the cloud is scary. Like, I mean, like if you really get down to it, even companies that are like, we do our own thing in house, really, or do you have like a server farm you work at? Oh, it's a server farm, so you're on the cloud. I mean, like it's just somebody else's computer. It's just a definition of whose it is.
So can you host a single Microsoft Access database on the Azure cloud? Because if so, I feel like all of my lines of business would.
Me now? You're being mean. I don't know the answer to that question. It's not fair to ask me difficult IT-related questions.
No, what I want to do is I want to run my crystal report on premise, export that to a CSV, and upload it into my cloud Microsoft Access instance.
Sorry, I blanked out after you put down the Franzia and ran your hands through your hair.
It's La Fea. La Fea. It's a Tempranillo. I don't know what that is.
My God.
It's almost empty. It's been a good night for James.
Especially considering the time he spent in the murder van.
Well, that's because you guys were all late. I was ready to go, and you guys were all late.
Technically, in the state of Missouri, open containers aren't illegal.
Well, Jamie, as long as you have one person that's not driving, which would be the person who got tied up. So
yeah,
that explains so much.
Fake news.
Oh, there we go. And then the evening went.
My new favorite phrase: alternative fact.
Alternative facts.
That's what I've started putting on my my beta releases of dashboards. Is just alternative facts ghosted over the background, so you couldn't be held liable.
So now that we're starting to successfully trample off the rails.
Tempranilla.
Here's what I'd like to put out there, because I bounced into this a couple times over the past couple of weeks. The EU, I am going to get serious here. The whole GDPR thing that's coming, that's not coming, that's already out. There are beginning to be a proliferation of ethics committees for big data, AI, machine learning, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that are coming out. And I'm wondering, has anybody else encountered these organizations? What's been your experience? At times they feel, I'll just leave it at that and see what anybody else thinks, if anybody else has hit them lately.
Well, I guess my first question is, how much are they charging, and what does it take to form one?
They are forming sua sponte of their own accord. They're like mushrooms. They just pop out with brains. So enough data falls, and they're like, I have an opinion.
Ooh, I have an opinion.
I have those. Hey, look, we could form one right here.
Yeah. I forgot it.
What was he talking about?
The ethics and morality of big data and predictive analytics is what I'm starting to bump against.
I think Alda said it best earlier. You know, at what point do we trust a machine to make a diagnosis? You know, when do you trust the computer to be able to do something more accurately than a human? And you know, there's going to be this transition over time from not using it all to using it in parallel to aid in decision support for clinicians to Skynet. We're still way over here.
I'm so torn with it because, back when I was doing kind of research and we were looking at the accuracy of diagnosis, I think this case was particularly with, colorectal cancer patients. And we looked at the accuracy of it wasn't prognosis. I think it was with the accuracy of identifying like the disease within that particular patient. And multiple physicians, like if you take an average across them, I think it was at about 60%. And when you feed that data to a machine learning algorithm, it came back with, each model was a little bit different, but at minimum, 80%. So, that's why I'm torn, because I think the technology exists that the accuracy of kind of machine learning, of building an algorithm, may actually surpass what we're able to do manually through kind of human experience. But the trust is not there to completely come off of that equation, to pull humans out and say it's all going to be machines, especially when it comes to diagnosis. Areas where maybe we are maybe a little bit closer is maybe like in the call center area. If you've got data in there to predict kind of who's gonna call and who do you want to route that call to, preference related things, maybe a little bit less risky. Technology is there to be able to produce it, and the trust might be a little bit easier as kind of a start-off point.
What do you mean? Can you expand on that last part as far as
Which
she
part?
doesn't trust you, Hudson. That's all. That's fine.
It's that beard without a mustache thing.
Happy wife, happy life. She likes this, but not this. That's all I gotta say.
See, my wife won't let me shave any of it.
Oh, I know. My wife says that too, but I also have to look professional.
Well,
Do you guys remember that episode with the shirtless mutton chops? Jamie, you probably.
I've got a screen cap I'm happy to tweet out after.
I just, here's the thing. Not all of us can get wildlife habitat recognition for owls that Jamie does. But the little baby owlets in your beard, they're very fun to feed at conferences. You just throw little free food at them.
All right. We're coming off the rails.
Right. But I smell a part too. I
do smell a part too, actually. So maybe to summarize and start to bring us to a close for this evening. I like it, right? We've had some good conversation around bringing the business around to liking us, using the tools we build for them in a way that doesn't mean they're out there reinventing the wheel every time. We've had some talk around, the pace in which we get our data isn't really the issue anymore. Screw the cloud. We don't need it yet. Did I miss anything else? No. Privacy, HIPAA, cloud lawyers.
Bah.
No.
Lawyers are just the worst.
Oh my gosh. Unless it's your own, then they're the best.
I did not say that out loud in a forum that's appropriate for public consumption, because that would be libelous slander.
We didn't name one.
You can name me.
Melanie?
No, my name is Hudson.
Yeah, but it's been Melanie the entire show, just so you know. I think you're logged in under your wife's account.
Well, let's hope it's his wife. A civil lawyer.
That's a way of protecting himself. We should have gotten in.
We'll fix it in post. It's fine.
Yeah, we'll just edit that.
It's gonna sit right alongside the Christmas episode of 2009.
Was that Sloshy Bells? Sloshy Bells.
I didn't have enough time to bleep that one. Any closing comments from the Peanut Gallery before we bring us to a close?
No, thanks everybody for joining. This was great.
Yeah, it was a good conversation.
Thanks for showing up, baby.
I feel like there's many healthcare stones still left to overturn over more bourbon. Thank you all for sticking around late at night. Alda, Hudson, thanks for being a first-time guest. Hopefully you'll be back.
Absolutely.
I hope so too. It's a pleasure to meet you all. I look forward to seeing you in St. Louis in vivo. We should do the next show in person.
Yes.
Preferably not at Jamie's.
We did my man cave.
Your head has gotten further and further out of the frame until now. I'm not even certain you're wearing pants or a shirt.
No. This is Eric's forehead.
Hold on. Wait. I'm gonna get you that. Here we go. There we go. You have seen the light. And this is why you wear makeup when you're recording.
You guys can come over to my murder dungeon anytime you want. It's fine.
Hold on, wait. What did the lady at the makeup lady at SAP say? She looks at me and she goes, "You 40 watt, I make you good." And she looks at Eric. She's like, "You 90 watt, I make you 60."
True story.
Is that metric?
Probably.
I'm just gonna pick it. All right, friends. Thank you all for another great show. We'll catch you next time.
Sounds good. Thank you.
This podcast is hosted and sponsored by EV Technologies. Visit us on the net at SaveTheCMS.com.
D-Slayer!